All right, it's episode 237 here on Empty the Bench. Tom Albano here. Nick Morgasen not with me due to some scheduling conflicts. So, in his place, I've managed to pull out my co host from the MMA Outsiders and from Tough Enough, Zain Bando. Zan, welcome aboard. Of course, you can also listen to Zan on Bando's Breakdowns every Wednesday. Can't forget about that. So, Zan, welcome aboard, ETB rookie.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to fill in, and we should have a very fun and exciting show this week with a lot of interesting topics across a lot of different sports. And just as Tom alluded to, for those of you who have never seen me before, or well, for those of you who have never seen me that are only loyal listeners to the flagship show, as he just said, you can catch me on the MMA Outsiders, which airs every Tuesday evening, and you can catch me on my newly minted solo show that I do every single Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern called Bando's Breakdowns, where I give my unfiltered takes and opinions on everything in the world of sports that matters to me. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to be it's a part of the very long-winded history of ETB. And thank you again for having me aboard. It's going to be fun.
Of course, it's awesome to have you. Uh, as Nick would always like to say here, make sure to follow along with us across social media at ETB Sports on Facebook, X, and Instagram. Follow the network at ETB Network, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok. Make sure to subscribe to youtube.com/ETB Network. I mentioned the other day on the MMA Outsiders that we have past 750 subscribers. I should correct myself. We passed 760 subscribers. We're in the 760 range now very quickly. Thank you to all of you for all of your support. We thank you so much for that. Uh, and of course, you can listen to Empty the Bench and all the Empty the Bench Podcast Network shows wherever you get your podcasts, whether it be Acast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, so much more, as well as, which Zan and I have talked about for 2 episodes of the MMA Outsiders now. If you subscribe to YouTube Premium, you can also make an audio version of the show technically too on here, so you don't really have to see our ugly mugs on YouTube.
No, you certainly don't. And again, just as he alluded to, if you are listening on the audio only platforms, be sure to come back over to the YouTube home, and again, be sure to like and subscribe, and be sure to hit the notification bell. That way, you don't miss anything regarding this show, regarding our show, the MMA Outsiders, regarding my show, Bando's Breakdowns, and so much more. So there's a lot of fun stuff on the horizon for everybody involved, uh, and this should be another fun-filled episode with a lot of drama, so to speak, for sure.
For sure. Of course, go to etbpodcast.com for more information about the network. And, well, Zan heads up the blogging section over there, and they just crank out content left and right at these days.
For sure. It seems like a new piece of content is coming out every 3 or 4 days. Very, very NFL and combat sports heavy, but we mixed in some other sports topics here and there. But I can guarantee you, with the NFL season being under 100 days away, that the NFL and college football content is going to ramp up here in short order. So stay tuned to that link right there at etbpodcast.com for information and more great content regarding some of the biggest sports topics of the week, of the month, and sometimes of the year, based on what's it's to break. But for those of you who need your major sports fix, that's the place to go.
Absolutely. And, of course, Empty the Bench and all the shows here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network are presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. The NBA Finals are on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. Join us on Friday, June 14th for Game 4 as Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, and the Dallas Mavericks take on Jason Tatum, Jalen Brown, and the Boston Celtics. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETV Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. This is why actually Nick Morgasen is not with us, because Nick Morgasen is currently doing preparations for Game 3. We are recording a couple of hours before Game 3 is scheduled to tip off. Zam will actually be heading over there for a little bit, I believe, after we get done at some point after we get done. So Nick and then eventually Sam will be on the call for game 3 tonight. Uh, and if the Mavericks end up pulling out in game 3, nothing to worry. We'll go back to Boston. But if the Celtics win game 3, then we'll be heading into tomorrow, Zan. Tomorrow from when this show is airing, with the potential that the Celtics could sweep and become NBA champions.
Yeah, and that's just weird to think about considering that this was going to be a high octane series in itself with a lot of with a lot of drama on both sides. And just to make a quick note, Dallas is simply hasn't shown up from three. Luka Doncic, despite him scoring in the it just hasn't had the same clutch shots that he had previously, both in the Western Conference Finals and in the second round. And since Boston it just took advantage of every opportunity, and the re-addition, if you will, of Kristaps Porzingis has been a major help in the first 2 games, and it'll be interesting. Assuming that Dallas wins game 3 at the time that this is going to drop on Thursday, rather, or that Dallas can make it a series, but it obviously remains to be seen. But still, a lot of exciting stuff both on the NBA front and on the Stanley Cup front. It's as the two quote unquote longest seasons, if you will. Well, they seem short in numbers, but the 2 of the longest seasons are almost over before we finally get into the dark sports period of summer. So it should be fun.
Hey, baseball's always around, so I'll never consider a dark period, as well as all the combat sports. So it'll never be a dark period for me.
Fair enough. For some people, though, I'm not one of them. For some people, though, it might as well be considered that, considering if you either don't follow either sport or only follow one of the 2 sports, it very well varies. But I get what you mean.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's talk about the top. I mean, let me just do a brief run through for everything we're going to talk about. We'll have some NBA news, obviously, the passing of Jerry West, Caitlin Clark being left off Team USA and sparking all sorts of debate. Because we are the MMA outsiders, and this is the MMA outsider invasion of ETB Sports, we will talk about the madness that is Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler, because it very quickly ruined our episode this week. And
Yeah,
then
not only very quickly ruined our episode for this week, but at the time that we're recording this, there's a new update. So there's even more
Yeah,
to talk about
we
now.
can't even keep up with any of this. Joey Chestnut will not be competing in this year's Nathan's Hot Dog Eating Contest, which is a blow, at least to me. And then
Me too.
we'll have some small NFL headlines. But first things first, leading off for this week, it's been the talk of the town ever since last week when the decision was, we had LeBron with his decision years ago. Now we're going to have Dan Hurley with his decision. And ultimately, and I think, Zan, this took everybody by surprise.
I think
After
so
being
too.
offered a 6-year, $70 million offer to jump ship to the Lakers to become their new head coach, Dan Hurley has turned it down. He will remain at UConn and will attempt to pursue a third national championship.
Well, good for him. I think that college basketball coaches, especially ones like him, deserve to stay in college. He's definitely a player's coach, and he's definitely a college coach. I don't think he would have fit well in the NBA system. I think he has a very specific method to his madness, and seeing him walk in rare form in person in the national championship game led me to believe that as I was watching it, that he would be stupid to leave the UConn Huskies. So I'm very glad for the UConn fan base and for himself and for everybody involved in the Big East that he's going to stay, because UConn can still be the premier team in that conference. And given given the pieces that they have coming back, and given what he might be able to work in the transfer portal, this team should be very good for years to come. So UConn fans can finally rejoice, which is a good thing. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, to turn down, $70 million and, over a 6-year period. So I'm trying to do the math quickly in my head, but that would be about somewhere between 11 and $12 million a year. I mean, that's definitely something that's, on one hand, Zan, very hard to turn down, making all of that money to be an NBA head coach. But at
I
the same
agree.
time, but at the same time, I mean, you're going to be pursuing number one, you're going to be pursuing history. by
Right,
trying to become a three-time back-to-back-to-back men's college basketball national champion as a head coach. Number two, uh, I mean, I don't know if Dan Hurley, like you said, would have been really a good fit with the kind of system that the Lakers have, and the what Dan Hurley runs. Number three, I mean, I mean, also for number two, by the way, it's also kind of asinine that he would get this kind of contract with what he's doing in college basketball, and he's never coached an NBA game. No disrespect to Dan Hurley.
I didn't mean to stop you, but is it is it asinine, acid 10, and acid 15, or just asinine? I have to know. I had to do it too.
Mm, where is it? Hold on. Why can't I find it anymore? Well, you know what? I'll play this because Pat Sajak just retired recently. That's what I thought of your reference there. Uh, and sorry. And third of all, I mean, look, if Dan Hurley went over to the Lakers and he was their coach, yeah, Nick and I have talked, Zan, for a while about how the NBA is a player-run, player-driven league, in spite of the fact that their
For
coaches,
sure,
general managers.
for sure. It's
Yeah,
star driven. It's player driven. 1000%. Please continue.
So if you've been following the news of what's going on with the Lakers as one of two potential teams to potentially draft Bronny, and the talk that maybe they will draft Bronny as a means of trying to lure LeBron back uh to LA in what would be essentially a free agency after he opts out of the deal officially because Rich Paul let that slip over the air. Good job. Now, I mean, not that we didn't expect it. But I'm just saying, Zan, imagine if LeBron goes there and you're Dan Hurley. Dan Hurley would have basically no power. And if LeBron is there, and things are a disaster, Dan Hurley could be out of a job rather quickly. If as UConn, at least because of all of his success, he has stability.
Oh, he has stability for sure, and to piggyback off that, he's also reassuring recruits that he's going to be there for the long haul. Because think about his current recruiting class and kind of probably on edge. Some of these guys were a couple weeks ago thinking that maybe he was going to leave, and now with him staying, it reassures them and reassures everybody else around the program that they're going to be in good hands for years to come. So
And just because you brought up recruiting, Zan, and I've heard forget who it was, but it was somebody on Around the Horn when I was listening a couple of days ago when the news first dropped.
okay.
Yeah, just because you make a great college recruiter does
Oh,
not
you
mean
know
you're.
what? It was probably Bob Ryan who said that. He's
No,
eh,
I don't think Bob Ryan was on the show on Monday.
okay.
But basically, it was just because you make a great college recruiter, that's not going to translate into going over to the NBA, working with these stars and players, and trying to lure, work with the GMs and the front office to lure free agents.
No, absolutely not. Correct.
So, at this point, I was fearing because from things that I heard, I was fearing that he was going to take this job, and I wouldn't have blamed him for the money's sake. But I think it's just a much better fit that he stays over in UConn. And this is not the first time that we've seen the Lakers try to lure the big college coach, the big championship college coach too. When you think about, I wasn't it Coach K like 10, 15 years ago?
Probably 15 years ago, I would say. Yeah.
It was, like, late 2000s, early 2010s they tried to lure him.
Somewhere in there. Mhm.
So and he turned them down too. So,
Right.
I mean, it might just be best for all parties involved. I just found it my eyebrow kind of raised when all the news was going on a couple of weeks ago that JJ Redick was the target to be the Lakers head coach, and then all of a sudden that shifted to Dan Hurley.
Yeah, that was very, very surprising, and I wonder how JJ Redick feels now given that the vacancy is still open. So,
I mean, but I also agree with Nick in that, number 1, I mean, JJ Redick has no coaching experience, and number 2,
right.
I don't know why he would leave. I agreed with because Nick Morgasen said this originally. I don't understand why he would leave his comfy, cozy commentating job with ESPN to go be a head coach, especially with an organization like the Lakers, and especially again if LeBron James, Bronny, or whatever big star is over there and dealing with them.
And also, when you think about it, Los Angeles is a top 3 media market. They
Mhm.
expect success right away. And if JJ Redick were to get hired as the head coach and he doesn't see immediate success, people are going to be calling for his head. So I totally agree in this instead if he was going to consider taking the Lakers job that he would have to think long and hard about it because his reputation overall with how he might be remembered for his post playing career could very much be at stake. So it's very, very interesting.
For sure. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Lakers here and what the next step is going to be when it comes to a head coach. And for Dan Hurley, I mean, the push for the three-peat continues on now.
Yeah, the push for the three-peat continues on, and they should probably have little to no trouble winning the Big East. The only real challenge they'll have is Marquette, and then obviously their NCAA tournament warriors. So we'll see. We'll we'll see what happens. College basketball is a crazy game. There's a lot of parity involved, but I'm sure as the days, minutes, hours, and months count down to the beginning of November when UConn season is about to start, there's going to be a lot of anticipation and a lot of pressure, and it will be exciting to follow. That's for sure.
A little bit of somber news now to transition on to. Jerry West, the man who was known as the influence for the NBA logo, one of the greatest Lakers of all time, one of the greatest, a several time NBA champion and executive of the year, passing away at the age of 86 in Los Angeles. So, I mean, Zan, just to read off some of his accomplishments, he won as a player, he was an NBA champion in 1972 with the Lakers, then goes on to be be a coach and an executive and wins even more championships 1980, 1982, 85, all the way, Zan, into the 2010s for two of the four times that he was with 2 years, 2015, 2017, when he was with the Golden State Warriors. And then two-time NBA Executive of the Year, as I mentioned, 1995, 2004. just over 25,000 points. He averaged 27 points a game in his career, 5,366 rebounds, 6,238 assists, and he actually has a Pan American gold medal. He was a 1960 Olympic gold medalist in the Basketball Hall of Fame as a player, college basketball Hall of Fame, one of the greatest minds that basketball has ever seen.
Oh, 1,000,000%. And just to see the outpouring of tributes coming in from people in the basketball world, people outside of the basketball world, people in the entertainment world. He was very well beloved for everything that he did. I mean, and even though it's very sad that he passed away, he did live a full and fulfilling life, and for him to do it in the middle of the NBA Finals, in my a humble opinion, is very, very fitting. So I would, him and well, I would his family and everybody wanted my sincerest condolences, and anyone who liked him from a basketball perspective, or even as a human interest perspective, because he was a fantastic interview. He will definitely be sorely missed. That's for sure.
For sure. Just to go over more of his stats, by the way, NBA Finals MVP in 1969. He was a 14-time All-Star, 10-time All NBA first team, two-time All NBA second team. Excellent defender. He was actually both a scoring champion and assist leader, and was placed on the All Defensive team all throughout the 1970s. I mean, he had a hell of a talent as a player, and he was one of those who transitioned that, as I mentioned, being a great basketball mind, he transitioned his skills on the court into being a coach, into being an executive. And as you kind of mentioned, everyone's outpouring of support shows you just the kind of influence that he had on NBA figures. And I know there had been talk, years ago, Zan, of maybe, hey, maybe the NBA should get some sort of new logo, maybe one based on MJ or based on Kobe or based on LeBron. But I don't think any sort of logo can beat the Jerry West based logo that we see, that we've known all our lives at the very least with the NBA.
Yeah, that'll never happen now. His legacy is cemented, and I don't see the NBA ever changing the logo, at least anytime soon, for hopefully for as long as you and I are both alive, but you never know. So
Mhm. Uh, and I actually saw some tweet, some Twitter user in the basketball community said, "Wow, like, you mentioned he passes away before, but during the NBA finals, somewhat fitting. And then somebody said he also passes away before Boston wins the championship. So they said grade A hater move.
Yeah, I mean, could you just imagine now if the Dallas Mavericks somehow come back and win the series now? It would be weird, wouldn't it?
If it would be weird. That would be something that Hollywood would never write.
Oh, of course. Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
Uh, let's go to news that is sad, but not as sad in this kind of way. Sad in that people are very pissed off, and that's with Caitlin Clark. So we've talked about recently how Caitlin Clark, is she being targeted with some of these hard fouls in WNBA games? We talked about that last week on ETV Sports. I know you've talked recently about Caitlin Clark on your show, and now here Caitlin Clark has been left off of the Team USA roster for women's basketball at the upcoming Paris Olympics in a couple of months.
Yeah, so as you guys, or excuse me, Tom, as you just alluded to, for those of you who have not listened to episode 8 of Bando's breakdowns, go check it out because I read in that episode I read Team USA's statement, and I also give my thoughts on this omission of Clark. And look, I'm just gonna be blunt. I'm gonna say it again. I may be being repetitive here, but it's truly how I feel. There's been all this talk about the WNBA and growing the game and the new stars that are in the game, from Angel Reese to Cardozo to Caitlin Clark and several others. Marina Mabry being another one who also plays for the Sky, and a couple others. And my point in saying it is, if you want to grow this game, you have to have stars that are marketable. And Caitlin Clark is the definition of it. He has millions of social media followers across, I believe, 4 different platforms. She's a polarizing figure to some people like her, some people don't. But what people respect is the way she plays basketball. And what's truly disappointing to me, and where I think Team USA is missing the mark, and I totally understand that they want the 12 best players that they can to win the Olympics. That's everybody's goal, right? But if you want everybody in the world to own it, if you want the Olympics to be the most global event in the world for a month's time, there is no bigger star in professional sports on the female side at this very second in time than Caitlin Clark herself. So for Team USA to write a canned PR statement, pretty much saying that we did what was in the best interest of the team and we decided to only pick the 12 best players, is to me the biggest bunch of baloney ever, and that should serve as extra motivation for Caitlin Clark to come back next year, be the best player in the entire league, and prove that by 2028 she deserves to be on an Olympic team of some kind. Because to me, it was an absolute ball drop, no pun intended, by Team USA to let this happen, and they did. So I don't get it. What do you think?
It reminds me, and I forget where I heard this comparison, but Sand, it kind of reminds me of the 1992 Dream Team, because we talk about all the big NBA stars being on that team, but the decision that was made that uh, I'm not sure everybody kind of remembers, Christian Laettner was actually on that Dream Team, and he was chosen over a certain 7-foot guard by the name of Shaquille O'Neal as the one of the last picks out there, and I guess you can say the college player on that all-star Dream Team. So Caitlin Clark being left off here kind of, draws maybe a little bit of parallel to that. Um, I understand that Caitlin Clark has not gotten off to the greatest of starts within the WNBA, but
And
you
I
look
and
at
I and I totally get that as well. But I feel like if the reason why people are tuning into the WNBA more because of her, and if they want more exposure on the Olympic side, that to me just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
and that's the thing of it, San, is that even if she doesn't have as big of a role on the team in this case because of the other star power and the experience with the current Team USA women's basketball roster, you know, at least her being there gives, as you mentioned, the exposure. I bet you NBC is kicking themselves mad right now that Team USA kind of made this decision.
Of course, it would be. Tom, and I know we're big combat people, but it would be the same thing as 18-year-old Floyd Mayweather not boxing at a great and Rapids and competing for Team would say if that makes sense before Floyd Mayweather became Floyd Mayweather. If you know what I mean.
Hmm. And I was gonna say, look, I know she hasn't got off to the greatest of starts of the WNBA, but you can't deny what she did
At
within
Iowa.
college.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
what she did at Iowa basically should be considered, credible, credibility enough for her to have made this team.
Of
And
course. And to make it to two national championships in a row, despite not winning either of them, and her having the most pressure out of all of her teammates, that has to count for something. That's what I think.
for sure. And like I said, maybe, there could have been a way where, look, maybe I would get blasted for suggesting this because it's Caitlin Clark. But like I just said, maybe what if, she had just, well, came off of the bench? I know it sounds weird to say,
No,
but
it's true. I was thinking the same thing. Like why not? Why not have her as a sixth woman, if you will, off the bench?
because you consider, like we talk about, how Team USA, whenever you look at the basketball rosters for Team USA, and not just as of late, that 1992 Dream Team, it's like it's always some sort of pact, with the big stars. So people you would not expect, people who would be leading teams or would be the second in command on teams are coming off the bench. I feel like Caitlin Clark doing that for an Olympic roster wouldn't have been too far-fetched.
For sure.
And just the decision is kinda baffling when, like I said, if you're NBC, you're probably livid. You want all the exposure on the Olympics and basketball being such a talking point, Zan. Like, the face, like we talked about, the face of college basketball this college basketball season wasn't anybody on the men's side. It was Caitlin Clark.
Right. And then it's someone who's a diehard men's college basketball consumer. Yeah, I have to admit that there was not a single star bigger than Caitlin Clark in the entire sport, even on the men's side. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, I mean, this is just a baffling decision. Now, credit to her. She said, "You know what? I'm gonna use this as fuel, get hungry, come back even stronger the next time, the next opportunity for the Olympics comes around." And
Something tells me that she will make the 2028 team. What do you
oh,
think?
she will. She will. I'm confident in that.
For sure.
I'm so confident in that. She just needs a little development time. That's all.
Agreed, and she might need her overall team to be a little bit of a better team too first. But yeah, she
Hmm.
obviously can't do everything alone, but it's okay. But still, this is definitely going to be a big talking point throughout the entire Olympics. And yeah, I think many people, including us, are very frustrated to see that she's not going to be moving forward with them, especially considering this is one of the most highly anticipated Olympic Games in probably 10 or 15 years. So it's all it's all disappointing, and it's a telltale sign that, as you just alluded to, NBC did not get what they wanted. I think them and her are the two biggest losers in this whole scenario here, unfortunately. So
Yeah, unfortunately. Just to briefly cap off our little talk with the NBA. So Adam Silver has had his media availability during the NBA Finals, and he talked about one of the next ideas he has for the league right now is potential expansion. We've had expansion talks for quite a little while now with items such as maybe the return of the Supersonics or other locations that might be interested, whether they cities that had NBA teams or new potential markets. Uh, and Silver said, this is taken from ESPN, quote, "It's not preordained that we will expand this time, but I know there's an enormous amount of interest out there. There are wealthy individuals, institutions that would like to invest and buy NBA teams. But I think it's on the league to look holistically because there is the dilution." Silver said, this is actually coming from now Sports Business Journal. Silver
okay.
said that there is a concern, quote, concern that adding two teams could lead to a talent dip league wide, with approximately 35 individuals added to the player pool. Silver also discussed the quote need to find which markets could do the most to grow the game. while Silver has referenced Seattle and Las Vegas as potential new host cities in the past, he said that those sites are not a given either. At some point, we'd like to look outside the United States in addition to Canada. This may not be the right moment to do that, but I'm thinking long term as well. I mean, even though the Toronto Raptors and are the only Canadian team right now, there was once upon a time the Vancouver Grizzlies. So
That's true.
could Vancouver be in play? Could Montreal be in play with I don't know what it's called now. I know it was always called the Bell Center.
Yeah, I cannot recall off the top of my head what the new name is, but yeah, Montreal could be in play, Vancouver could be in play. Shoot, we talk about, every NBA draft, there's always a guy out of Europe somewhere that always goes number one or number two overall. You're Europe could be in play with their presence because as you may know, if you've done your basketball inside research, is that in Europe, the reason why the players are so fundamentally sound is they don't play every single day. They only play like once a week, and then they have 4 or 5 consecutive practices, which is why they're all so good. So actually expanding into Europe might actually grow the league because we could see the best players that didn't go to a major institution play on the biggest of stages and represent their home countries in the process. It actually would be great for the league. But again, on that same wavelength, I and understand Adam Silver's concerns. And with all their media rights talks, they have some bigger fish to fry first before they can really start thinking about potential expansion. But it'll be very interesting to see how this all plays out.
Absolutely. I think inevitably the NBA will expand. They say, maybe not now for Las Vegas, but given everything that's happened in Las Vegas with the NFL now being there, the NHL now being there, and having a Stanley Cup now there with last year with the Golden Vegas Golden Knights, the A's having their potential move as, tumultuous as it is, it's inevitable. Especially also given that the NBA All-Star game used to reside in Las Vegas, I think it's inevitable that the NBA is going to have a Las Vegas team.
Oh,
It's
they
just a
oh,
matter
oh they will. They will for sure. That's not and I think it's not a matter of if they will, it's a matter of when they
when
will.
they will. And the only issue with some of the names that I mean the some of the towns that he was talking about, San, with Vancouver and Seattle, that's another West Coast team. Unless you're going to somehow, completely shake up the East-West format. If you add a team on the West, most likely you're gonna or add two teams on the West, you're gonna have to add either one or two teams on the East side too.
Right, exactly.
Uh, what do you think? Because you mentioned talent, coming from Europe, representing their home countries. What do you think of that remark, though, about Silver? The concern he has is the talent will dip.
Yeah, I mean, it could dip from year to year, but on an overtime basis, I don't see that happening just because the talent seems to be getting better and better. I mean, shoot, we had Victor Wembanyama get drafted by the Spurs, and nobody knew who he was until he arrived in San Antonio. So it's very well possible that international talent could come into the league. As far as the talent dip goes, though, I think it's too early to assume that.
Fair enough. All right, let's talk about this one.
All right.
Maybe I need to get the MMA outsider stuff out here, so that way we can get back into our little own home territory.
Welcome to a ride on the outside. MMA is full of people on the inside, but what about the ones that watch from beyond? Welcome to the MMA Outsiders with Tom Albano and Zain Bando on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
Okay, we're back in our element now.
All right. So what are we on? Like day 7 of this madness now, where we don't know what's going on? What are we?
Okay.
What are we doing?
So this is a will they, won't they situation because last week when we talked about this story, we talked about, is this fight in danger? And then a couple of days later, it's like, oh, everything is okay. And then we go to record the episode that was released on Tuesday, episode 87. Uh, and then we find out as the audio version, because the audio version always premieres a few hours ahead of the video version. As we're doing that, uh, did we get news from Ariel Helwani? Oh, things are on even shakier ground, and now this fight may not even happen.
Yeah, and at the time that we're recording this, there's even been a more recent update from Ariel Helwani saying that the positivity that he had a week ago is pretty much shot, which is very disappointing to hear.
And the feelers are being sent out again, and the UFC is basically in scramble backup mode.
Yeah, scramble backup mode of plenty at the time that this is going to be released. What we're gonna have 16 days until this card. It's freaking madness. It's almost a race against the clock at this point. Like so, here's my theory. They're working on three different things. They're working on mending whatever injury Conor McGregor has. They're working on a potential replacement for who could fight Michael Chandler, and they're also working on a potential brand new fight that nobody knows about that may have gotten leaked at the Octagon card by some notable UFC light heavyweight. So I don't know. What do you think?
Just absolute craziness. That's what I think. Just absolute craziness. I will say, I was talking with a certain somebody today who I would say, is somewhat between casual and hardcore. It's weird. It's somewhere in the middle, and he
Is it,
basically
is it someone I don't mean to digress. Is it someone I've heard of, or is it someone that I've never heard of?
never heard of somebody in my
Okay,
life. Somebody in my
okay,
life.
okay.
But they had the analysis they actually agreed with Zan that this, if Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler does not happen, this is not a good card at all.
It's
And
not good at all. No, no.
especially Zan, when you've got International Fight Week, you have UFC X, you have the Hall of Fame. Like this is I have described International Fight Week, Zan, and the card that goes along with it on this show with Nick. I have described it as basically the UFC's WrestleMania. And if you're going to not have if you're going to put all of your eggs in Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler, like I get why the UFC, well, I shouldn't even say the UFC, why Endeavor or WMEIMG made that decision because McGregor and Chandler, Helwani has talked about this months ago. They wanted UFC 300, but the business people said, look, UFC 300 is going to be bought because it's such a big, it's such a big milestone of a card, and they stack that with talent. UFC 303, which could be a weaker card. We have let's put International Fight Week there. Let's put McGregor and Chandler on there so we can build that up into a big card. But now, if all the eggs are in McGregor and the McGregor basket falls, you got nothing.
No, you have nothing. And I'm not going to mention this person by name because I don't think I want his name out there, but a very credible MMA YouTuber, let's just say that, has kind of connected the dots and has either learned that McGregor may have hurt his head or injured his leg again, and which is why the UFC has remained silent.
Zen, I'm speculating. This is just me being speculative, but with the photo that we saw of him laying back and stuff, I think he may have re-injured the leg that he broke. He may have re-aggravated that in fight camp.
You think so?
I could see it. And if that's the case, San, then that beating that Dustin Poirier put to Conor McGregor's leg in that trilogy fight,
Which I was there for.
That may have been the very last we've seen of Conor McGregor, if that's the case.
I know. I'm gonna be the person to admit this, and I can say this because we're on the air. This is the most nervous I've been leading up to a fight in my entire life. It's almost like every day. It's almost like every morning I open my phone waiting for the words to happen. First, it was the postponed press conference. Then it was the three Ariel Helwani updates. Then it was yesterday. He's edition of the MMA Hour. It was last week's edition of the MMA Hour. No one knows what's going on. It's super stressful.
It is stressful, although I don't know if I can say this is the most nervous I've ever been. Because considering UFC 223 was in Brooklyn and seeing all the madness of that weigh-in day.
Yeah, but at least we knew we were going to get some sort of fight out of it, though, which was a good thing.
So option A at this point is they try to heal McGregor, which, like you said. Option B, they try to get somebody in there for Michael Chandler to face. And we've talked about last week, I mean 2 weeks ago, Zan, that we were it was saying, oh, it's not out of the McGregor camp. So we said, oh, maybe there's a chance Conor McGregor fights somebody else too. And the name Max Holloway has been thrown around, so maybe Holloway versus Chandler. But we've talked about, at least on the MMA Outsiders, we talked about the idea. Holloway has never fought at 170, and he's coming off. It was a couple of months ago, so maybe he's healed up by this point. But the war that he had with Justin Gaethje over 5 rounds at 300.
I don't think so because he was probably medically suspended for a very long period of times. Oh, I don't see how he's ready to compete. That's just me though. Now,
So
I have to ask you this question, although I did share this with you off the air over messages, of course, that UFC 305, that main event is 99% done. Do you think there's a potential that they pull an audible and is he versus DDP the main event of UFC 303 and they figure something else out for UFC 305, or what do you think?
while I would love that, because I did mention it as a possibility many months ago about, what could happen for International Fight Week, then comes the scheduling, it's Sydney all over again, because then comes the question, what do you do for 305 then? What's your
It's
main
true.
event then?
Yeah, it's true. Although Alexander Volkanovski, he did say in a recent interview that even though it's unfortunate for many people here that his next fight is supposed to be for a title, which is kind of unfortunate, but I don't really know.
But again, Zan, I've mentioned it a couple of times on our episode with the damage Volk has taken. I get Volk has that addiction to being there. I don't want to see him in for the rest of this year.
No, I agree. I agree.
If
That's
if
why
he takes
that's why it was
takes another
disappointing to hear it from him. Is what I was saying.
because it's like if he takes another fight this year, like it's basically he's opening himself to basically getting knocked out in the first round again, or
No,
first or second round again.
no, I know. So
So
given that our episode just aired 2 days ago surrounding this madness, how is your feeling now? Almost 2 weeks out. Do you think this fight happens? Do you think the fight doesn't happen? How do you? Yeah, I know you said that McGregor versus Chandler has to be UFC 303.
my San, just like Ariel Helwani, my positivity is starting to run out. The light is starting to disappear, and I'm starting to fear we're not getting this.
Okay. I sort of feel the same way you do, but I'm still erring on the side that it's still going to happen. There's too much money at stake. They have a $20 million gate. There's so many things surrounding the event, thousands of dollars
Actually,
more.
Zan, that's a good point to bring up, especially on sometimes we talk business here on ETV Sports. Nevada, and I talked about this with Nick. Nevada has a rule because, and I'm saying this, Zan, because obviously we don't have just a specific MMA audience on here. So Nevada has a rule: if they change the main event, then their UFC is basically going to be forced to offer refunds to fans.
Yeah, it's a big deal. So not only is it a big financial burden, biggest gate in UFC history, what you just alluded to with the rule from Nevada in the T-Mobile Arena, but there's so much more at stake surrounding this than I think people realize. And as much as we were excited that the UFC released a Roku documentary on 2023, there needs to be a documentary made
On
about this
2024,
because
or this fight, yeah.
this is outrageous.
And actually, Zan, I'm glad you brought up that Roku documentary because we also talked about the idea a couple weeks ago when this was first breaking. You know, do you maybe nip Madison Square Garden in the bud a little bit and do Jones Stipe here? But if you watch the Roku documentary, when they talk about John Jones's injury for the lat, they said 6 months to a year. So we just got to the 6 month mark now last month. So Jones, I don't think is going to be ready with not at least not with the kind of fight camp time that he would have.
No, I don't think so either. And according to some other sources that I know, Stipe was offered July but turned it down and said that he wouldn't be ready. So they're basically hell bent on making Jones Miocic uh,
For
uh
Square Garden.
um for Madison Square Garden again in his second attempt for the second year in a row. So
So at this point, I mean, since you kind of teased it, let's talk about the elephant in the room because I think this is ultimately what's going to happen now since my light is kind of fading. Uh,
okay.
it sounds like as of this point because You mentioned during Octagon, Yuri Prohaska. It's funny. We talked about Yuri and having a comparison with Robert Valentin on The Ultimate Fighter this season. Yuri Prohaska was being interviewed, an Octagon appearance, and somebody mentioned the possibility of him getting ready to step up, being there for 303. And the response was, oh, good speculation. And
Yeah.
then your buddy, Magic Man with Magic MMA Bets, he has also since reported the idea that potentially Alex Pereira versus Yuri Prohaska 2 for the light heavyweight title could be the replacement main event.
I mean, hey, if Alex Pereira fights Yuri Prohaska on 2.5 weeks' notice and wins, he has to be a guaranteed lock for fighter of the year, right?
Potentially, yeah. It's just saying, like you mentioned, with all the business going into the Conor McGregor basket and everything that they have riding on this, can they really, no disrespect to Alex Yuri. I love that fight, but is that really going to hold up?
I don't know, but if you're a hardcore MMA fan and
And you
that
got to
fight
love
was,
that.
oh, of course, absolutely. But I can only imagine the stress and the disappointment from the UFC staff member perspective, having to rebrand that card all over again.
Yeah. All right. Let's
Absolute
get out.
nightmare.
It is an absolute nightmare. Okay, let's get out of MMA Outsiders mode. Let's go back to everything here. Just had to entertain ourselves for a little bit. Let's talk about Zain. This is an interesting story that's grabbed the headlines. It's kind of out
Yeah,
of left field.
absolutely.
Joey Chestnut has been banned from the Nathan's hot dog eating contest this year. So apparently, Joey Chestnut has signed a sponsorship deal with a rival hot dog company. I have to get the name of that hot dog company that he has now.
It's apparently a vegan hot dog eating company, which the Nathan's hot dog eating contest executives probably did not like very much, considering that that's an all beef competition.
Oh, it's impossible. You're right. It's Impossible Foods.
Right.
So they have made the decision because of this to ban Joey Chestnut from competing in this year's contest. That means that basically, he had won 8 titles in a row before Matt Stoney defeated him in 2015. He regained the title in 2016, won every year since. Uh, and now he will not. His streak will again end at 8. The statement from Major League Eating: we are devastated to learn that Joey Chestnut has chosen to represent a rival brand that sells plant-based hot dogs rather than competing in the 2024 Nathan's Famous Hot 4th of July hot dog eating contest. Let's see. Oh, George Shea, the MLE co-founder, it's a long-standing rule not to represent a rival brand. Michael Jordan can't go to Adidas and say that Air Jordans are great. He did, however, continue on. Joey Chestnut is an American hero. We would love nothing more than to have him at Nathan's Famous International Hot Dog Eating Contest, which he has dominated for years. We hope he returns when he is not representing a rival brand. An account under Chestnut's name. We don't know anything about, is this is truly, I mean, CNN couldn't figure it out. I don't know if we can too, because, Elon's Twitter is Elon's Twitter, or pardon me, X. And I got to do that again to myself because I said Twitter. They talked about a statement that, oh, I just found out, through the media that basically he was banned. And he says does not have a contract with MLE or Nathan's or anything like that. They are looking to change the rules from past years. So maybe there's an 11th hour deal. I mean, look, I get this is a silly story because the hot dog eating contest is a silly competition. But, Zain, you're talking about the man who sets eating records by the storm. You are talking about the man. It was going to be rained out last year, and Joey Chestnut stepped up for all the eaters and said, F that, we're doing a contest. And you're going to ban. I mean, look, I get it from the business standpoint, but it just blows my mind. He has been banned. We've seen that with Takeru Kobayashi, which we'll get to the second part of that headline in just a second. That's a little bit of breaking news from the time that we are recording this. So,
That's true.
It blows my mind. Joey Chestnut's not going to be competing for a Nathan's hot dog eating contest yellow mustard belt this year.
Yeah, I mean, this was strictly a business decision, and whether you like it or not, Chestnut knows the risks of going against the grain and going with Impossible Foods. I'm gonna have to take the other side on this one and say that I think that the Ethan's hot dog eating contest made the right decision to ban him, because I'm sure it was all. I'm sure, even though they try to make it look like it's about him, it's not about him. It's about the financials they're going to lose, and that's it. It's
Yeah,
it's all a money issue, and not a Joey
and
Chestnut
that's the
issue.
thing, Zan.
At least in my opinion.
And Zan, that's the thing. Like, I get it also from the business perspective, but Takeru Kobayashi, obviously, he had his tumultuous falling out with MLE. Joey Chestnut now with this. You're not gonna have any star power for this competition if you don't,
No,
unless you follow Major League Eating on a diehard basis.
no, and you could argue too that this might be the lowest rated in Ethan's hot dog eating contest since Joey Chestnut began competing 15, 20 years ago, or however long it's been.
Yeah, yeah, honestly. So, I mean, it's a great new opportunity for somebody to step up, but at the same time, Major League Eating, you gotta work. You gotta pull the do. Maybe Zan the Shea brothers should call Dana White on advice on how to make a star now with given the situation they're in.
Yeah, I'm sure Dana could muster something up, no pun intended.
God damn it! God,
I had I had to do it. Hey, you have to remember, Dana is the same person that likes taking businesses that people don't think will work and make them into something. Even though according to him, he admitted that he messed up, that he said Power Slap had more social media followers than any major sport. It became
yeah,
the most viral clip on the internet for like 2 days.
because Real Madrid doesn't exist. Oh, did I say that out loud?
They have 630 million followers.
Jeez.
Okay, but back to the second part of this headline, though. You have to really shout out Netflix that they're really trying to get into the sports and entertainment business as much as they can.
They're trying not just sports and entertainment, they're getting into the live business. Everything is live at this point. We've talked about on MMA Outsiders how, they're trying to dip their toes with the boxing, with the Mike Tyson Jake Paul fight. They're trying to dip their toes,
In the
with the
NFL,
WWE coming in 2025, the NFL, that they're going to do the Christmas Day games.
potentially in air quotes, the UFC, if they choose to leave ESPN, which would be a massive deal, which could only mean one thing: that if I'm just going to say this too, that it's a little bit off topic, but the UFC signs with Netflix, it still makes people pay for the pay-per-views. I might blow my brains out. That would be absurd.
Zan, I don't want you to do that, first of
No,
all.
I would never. No, I would never
I
do
know.
that.
Second of all, it's funny. There was that TKO executive who mentioned maybe they can convince UFC to go with the WWE network style model, where they pay the
Which is what actually happens in certain countries on UFC Fight Pass, where that's literally what they do.
they hate America. The UFC actually hates America. I say that with the greatest verbal irony, considering Dana White and the people around him.
No kidding.
But yeah, no, I kind of love this. I love Chestnut and Kobayashi that they're gonna do winner take all hot dog eating the rivalry renewed.
Yeah, this will be one of the biggest days in the history of Netflix, and this is a competition, rather, or a day in September 2nd that people of all walks of life will be talking about for years and years to come, and it is going to be one of the biggest spectacles in America of the entire year. Entertainment, sport, pop culture, you name it, the whole world is going to see that.
Major League Eating should hire you with the amount of hyperbole you can put into your words.
Yeah, Major League Eating. This is just a public service announcement that if you want me to send over my resume, I certainly can.
Oh my gosh! All right, let's end with a couple of quick NFL headlines.
For sure.
I'm actually gonna do. I know we had planned it to do a different order, but I'm gonna make a little minor out of here because I do want to talk about this. Darren Waller. As a Giants fan, I'd like to say, it's been a disappointment. I love the way but I love the way that Darren Waller played. Just the one season was very disappointing with the injury, and of course, the one thing you can't do in New York media, sports media, is make a fool of yourself, and he kind of did that with the music video.
Yeah, and I could argue the same thing being from the Chicago suburbs that you can't do the same thing if you're in Chicago sports media either. Otherwise, you'll get eaten alive. One of the greatest examples of that is A. Cutler being overpaid in 2009 and not panning out for the Bears. The Chicago sports media conglomerates couldn't stand him. So I can relate to a certain extent that the reactions in both cities that are very cutthroat are very similar, as is this Darren Waller story, which to me, he had an okay career, but it's a career that he had so much more potential that he could have
Mhm.
gained that he just didn't.
No, and it kind of
and,
it,
and,
it's
to
like,
be-
it
and
feels like it feels like it's an early ending.
and to be fair, I just think he wasn't in the right systems for the teams that he played for too.
Even with the Raiders, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, I would concur with that.
All right. Rashee Rice, obviously, he is a name that is worth monitoring because of all this tumultuous offseason that he's been having, the threat of potential suspension coming from the NFL. He was speaking at a youth football camp and he got a chance to talk to reporters. He said, quote, "I've learned so much from that. All I can do is mature and continue to grow from that. This is a step in a better direction for me." All I'll say is you better hope. I hope that this is what he's had this offseason is not a sign of things to come.
Yeah, you only want to hope for the best for him. He's a rising talent in the league, and these professional athletes make these mistakes, but sometimes they go down the wrong path where they don't learn from them. So you gotta hope that this is only for the best. But from a Chiefs perspective, they just got to keep him grounded and make sure that he's focused on football and he's not worried about any of the off field distractions. Because if he gets worried about all the off field distractions, something very similar and or worse could happen again, and that's something you don't want to see, especially considering that the Chiefs have won back-to-back Super Bowls and are looking to be the first team, to repeat. I think it would be if the Chiefs win, wouldn't they be the first team to win 3 Super Bowls in a row, right? Or
They would
since
be the first they would be the first to win 3 Super Bowls in a row, and I believe they would be the first North American the first three-peat, winner in North American sports. I think the last time was the, Lakers at the start of the 2000s.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, absolutely. Yes,
Uh,
it's very interesting. This obviously was a pressure-filled offseason, and all eyes are going to be on him to see if he can perform with his cast of characters around him, and if he can stay composed. Because if he can, the sky's the limit for him and the Chiefs. So it'll be interesting
and I mean, you knew, Sand, a couple months ago when we were doing the NFL draft coverage, you knew they were fearing something when the Chiefs traded up and managed to draft Xavier Worthy. And we've seen, why they need somebody as explosive of a wide receiver like a Rice or Worthy, because we've seen the issues that it can be when it's just Travis Kelsey being the only, real recipient, only real talent, catching talent, that is.
for sure. Well said.
One last story here. Mike Tomlin has agreed to a 3-year extension. He is going to remain Pittsburgh Steelers head coach. And if you can hear in the distance, that's Schlosser, aka Urinating Tree from YouTube. I think I just heard him scream in agony.
Yeah, well, given that the Steelers are my second favorite team, I feel numb to this news considering that I know that now the Steelers are guaranteed to at least not have a losing season for the next 3 years, as is usually routine. But
But you
that
may not
probably,
make
but
playoffs
that
for 2 years.
right, but they probably either A will be a fringe playoff team, B won't win the Super Bowl, or Siege has finished 500 esque enough to not make the playoffs. So
Are you suggesting that Mike Tomlin's going to become the new Jeff Fisher?
Um, I mean, given that they haven't won the Super Bowl since 2008, and given that they haven't been to the AFC Championship game in 7 years, he's slowly but surely turning into that. Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
which is so
Look,
which is so disappointing to say, considering that he is one of the most consistent coaches in the NFL with ensuring that the Steelers win at least 8 games a year. So I don't know. They're 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 the weirdest team. It's like a roller coaster. Like weeks 1 through 5, they look really good, and you get to like week 10, and they're somehow semi 500, and then they lose 4 in a row, and they rack up 5 straight to make the playoffs. No one knows. It's
Yeah,
it's
no,
it's
it's
it's weird.
frustrating. I mean, being a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, I mean, I get it. Because I don't want to say it's frustrating because you talk about teams that don't have any Super Bowls or haven't won in a long time, but just in the current perspective of things, when you have a Mike Tomlin who, we mentioned head coach, always consistently having winning or 500 seasons, but you don't have the kind of success that you think you could have for this team. I mean, I think back, Zan, to that 2017 Steelers team, the one that lost in controversial fashion in I think it was the AFC divisional round to the Patriots, and you just wonder, was that it? Does that the door slamming moment? And it unfortunately seemed like it was.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it seems like it was, and it'll be
Either
interesting.
that, Zan, actually, let me correct myself. Either that or the fact that in the COVID season they went 11-0 and they just lost every single game after that and lost to the Cleveland Browns in the opening round.
Yeah, the COVID season was one of the most depressing closes to a season, not just for the Steelers, but one that was so sad. It was almost one of the worst I've ever seen in all of sports. I couldn't believe it. It looked like they were 11-0. They were going to coast to an undefeated season, a number 1 overall seed, and it didn't happen. And then you lose in the first round to a Cleveland team that you have no business losing to. Like it was just weird.
It was bad. So, Mike Tomlin I mean, I'm not surprised, Zan, Urinating Tree always talks about the Steeler way. They're one of these teams that's bound by tradition. They don't fire coaches. They either just, retire or their contract
What
doesn't
they've
get
been
renewed.
what they've been 4 coaches in 50 years or something.
Like, yeah, something like that. Like, I get it, but the question becomes, I mean, they made the playoffs last season as one of the last teams to get in, but the question is,
Yeah, but it's like you make the playoffs, but then again, you lose to the um you lose to the fragile shell of its former self, not even New England Patriots in the middle of the season, and you're like, what? You're like, what in the world happened?
yeah, I mean, it's kind of baffling. It's mind blowing. It's perfect Pittsburgh Steelers football.
It's true. It's true. And it would not be perfect Pittsburgh Steelers football with, of course, without, of course, a 3-year contract extension, which is exactly what Mike Tomlin got. So it all comes full circle at the end of the day.
Of course. All right, that's gonna do it for this edition of I almost said the MMA Outsiders.
You almost did it. You almost did it.
That's gonna do it for this edition of Empty the Bench. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get notified of everything here at the Empty the Bench Network. Follow us across social media: Facebook, X, and Instagram at ETB Sports. Follow the Empty the Bench Podcast Network: Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at ETB Network. Uh, Make sure to go to youtube.com/ETB Network. Obviously, if you are watching if you're listening on the audio end, make sure to go to youtube.com/ETB Network. Hit the subscribe button. We just passed 760 subscribers. Help us continue to climb to 1,000. If you're watching on the video end, make sure to take Empty the Bench and all the shows here at the network with you, wherever you get your podcasts: Acast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, so much more. Don't forget to go to etbpodcast.com for more information about the network and Zan and his contributors just continuing to crank out blog content. If you want to follow us too across social media, I'm at Thomas J. Albano. Zan is at ZanBando99 and Nick Morgasen at N Morgasen Radio. Nick will hopefully be back with me next week. And of course, shout out to our friends over at Playback. Game 4, Friday night, Celtics, Mavericks. Game 4, I believe the stream is going to start at 8:15 p.m. Eastern because I think that game is an 8:30 p.m. Eastern game.
That sounds
So,
right. Yeah.
all right, so stay tuned for that. Make sure to go to playback.tv/ETB Network. Shout out to Playback for all that they do, partnering up with us at the ETB Network. So, Zan and I will be back with you on Tuesday for the next edition of the MMA Outsiders, unless certain news breaks at some point during the weekend, which I fear.
Yeah, I fear the same thing too. But if it doesn't, I think it'll shape up to be arguably the craziest edition of the show the almost near 2-year history of the show. So
I mean, Stan, we already have a major boxing story that's going to basically take up part of the show too. So it
I
could be
know.
chaos it could be chaos at the start of next week.
For sure. With all that being said, and thank you again and for tuning in. Thank you again. And for those of you who had never heard from me before, thank you again for putting up with me as a special guest. And hopefully things will be back to normal for episode 238. But until then, have a great rest of your week and we will see you guys soon.
Take care, everyone.
Take care.